Hello, welcome to this webinar all about content marketing. My name is Matt Youdale from a PR and marketing agency called Arch Communications. More of that in a minute. First thing I'm going to do is share my screen with you so that you can see my slides. So bear with me while I get the presentation up and running. So hopefully you can see that now. So I'm going to talk about content and particularly content marketing. People often wonder what marketing is. It's to do with creating content to promote yourselves online primarily. And here's me. I've been doing content marketing for quite a few years now. I'm actually on my third career. I was a journalist for 25 years, so writing is very much part of what I do and always has been. I was then a director of communications in the NHS. And then I set up Arch Communications 10 years ago. And if you're wondering around about the logo in the top right-hand corner, it's actually our 10th anniversary this year. So we've managed to survive the pandemic so far, at least. So content is a big part of what I've done throughout my life. And hopefully I'll be able to share some of my experiences and tips and give you an idea of how content marketing can really give your business a boost. First of all, why does content matter? Well, it might sound obvious, but here are a few reasons that are worth reminding you about. It definitely raises your awareness online. The more active you are online, the more people see you. But also, if you use the right content, you can also establish yourself as a real expert in what you do, which of course is a real way of selling yourself. It gives you status and establishes you as an expert, also makes you more distinctive. And in doing that, it's strengthening your overall brand and your business. It also helps, particularly when it comes to content that you're adding to your website with search engine optimization and SEO, because Google likes you to be adding new content to your website on a regular basis. And if you do all of this correctly and regularly, your audience naturally grows. You will find your followings, particularly on social media, will increase, which has to be a good thing, doesn't it? Now, the thing about content is it's not all the same. I can't claim to have created this graphic. I found it online, but actually someone summarizes it really well. So I've pinched it. Sorry to whoever it belongs to. Here you've got different layers of content, starting at the bottom with your social media posts. And that's stuff that you should probably be doing on a daily basis. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we come on to regular blogging and other content that you might be putting in various places that's reasonably regular, probably once or twice a month. You can produce infographics and special slideshows about your work. You can also then go on to extending your blogs to making them into almost like thought pieces, extended blogs. And right at the top, you've got what we call white papers, which are really substantial pieces of work where you've really put quite a lot of effort in. And you do that once in a while, but you can get a big impact from it and get a return on the time investment you made in that. We did this recently at Arch Communications. We produced an ebook called Business Leaders Guide to Good Communications, which had various sections about various aspects of our work, PR and social media and writing, etc., etc. And we did that really because we're happy to share some of our expertise, but also that point about content marketing. In establishing yourselves as an expert, you are potentially bringing business to you. So that's why we do it. So different layers of content. And if you're in the business to business environment, you should probably at some point be doing all of these layers. So the upper layers, you don't do so often, but the ones towards the bottom, pretty much every day. I will talk more about the scheduling and frequency of content in a minute, but the first thing that always falls out when you say to people you should be active every day is people say, what on earth am I going to talk about? Well, I'm hoping that this slide and the next one will help you a little bit with some ideas. It's very easy to get too close to your business or your organization and you can't really see the wood for the trees. So stuff that you're doing is really actually quite interesting. You don't share it because it's routine to you, but it's not routine to other people. So just think about what's going on in your daily lives, first of all, and try and capture it. One of the best responses we ever got to one of our tweets was when I was up a ladder changing a light bulb in our office. And someone took a photo and tweeted it with a jokey comment about how many PR people does it take to change a light bulb. And we got lots of reaction to it. It also shows a bit of personality. So there's news about your business. If you're holding events, then promote them beforehand, whether it's networking or something you're doing in connection with your business, and then talk about it afterwards as well, so you get more than one bite at the cherry. Useful information about your business, your opening times, where people can find you, your contact details. You might think that stuff is obvious. Actually, it isn't. So you can use this to create content, particularly on social media. Talk about your products and services a lot. There are lots of different ways you can attack that. Think about the people it will appeal to. If it's a service, what problem it will solve. Give little scenarios where and stories about what you've done for others. Really rich hunting ground for content that. Special offers or marketing campaigns you may be running. I've mentioned that we're 10 years old this year, and we've just launched our own marketing campaign around the idea of the power of 10, which obviously is linked to our 10th anniversary. And that will probably run through the years, giving us a huge amount of content. We're actually doing a lot around tins because, believe it or not, tin is the material associated with the 10th anniversary gift. So we've actually had some labels made, and we're taking our tins in lots of different situations to reflect the fact that PR marketing reaches into every part of our lives. So, okay, it's a bit of a gimmick, but it's generating content and a talking point for us. There's no reason why you can't do the same thing. Think always about your USPs. What makes you special? And again, it's easy to get too close to this and forget what's special about you. So, your facilities, your philosophy, things you're proud of in particular, your team. So, your staff profiles too. Share profiles of your team, weave them in. I talked about the light bulb thing. So pictures of you and your team at work, just going about your business. And that's where the behind the scenes stuff comes in too. What is your core narrative? I mentioned USPs, but are you clear what it is that makes you special? Do you do charitable work? Do you do volunteering? What are the other things about your business that you could share that gives people a fuller picture of who you are? A big thing is to share expertise. Little tips and blogs are really important parts of your content. They are what shows other people what you're capable of. And don't forget thank yous and testimonials too. You probably get them, you probably seek them out from clients or customers. So where you can, seek permission, ask if you can share these online, and do. Now, of course, they're great on your website as part of maybe a case study, but they're also really useful on social media. And here's a little tip for you, which you may already be doing, but if you're not, you might find this useful. If you've got a short quote from a happy customer, cut and paste it into an empty PowerPoint window, put some nice quotation marks around it, the name of the person, the company that's given you the quote, put your own logo on it so it's branded, save that slide as a JPEG, and then you've got a really nice image to share with a social media post. It's just a nice way of bringing a testimony to life and having a bit more impact with it. And there are still more content ideas here. So signpost and share what's relevant from others. I'm going to talk more later on about topicality because that's really important, about riding the wave of what's in the news at the moment. But think about what you do that's relevant to others. And it might just be commenting on a news story, for example, or it might be other stuff that's happening in your locality that you think others might find useful. So that's often where you're following other people and they come up with interesting stuff, and then you just share that and you're enriching your own timeline, your own activity by doing that. I mentioned the USP around charity, fundraising and volunteering. That's great if you do it and talk about it. Don't be shy about it. Did you know, just random facts about your business? I don't know, the number of steps you walk in a day, the number of years of experience you've got across your team, the fact one of your team has run the London Marathon 3 times. It could be anything. Quirky and funny things. Again, I mentioned the light bulb, but stuff just does happen. Sometimes you can engineer it too. And people do like that. Often it is the funny stuff that people respond to most. If you're lucky enough to be shortlisted or win an award, then for goodness sake, make a lot of noise about that and make sure you're putting it out there, blogging about it, why did you win, and putting it onto your social media. Seasonal posts, talk about the weather. We'll just tap into what everyone else is talking about at that particular time. Especially if it feels relevant to your business. Sometimes you can overdo the connection and it becomes a bit forced. So be careful of that. But everyday stuff like the weather, it relates to everybody. And I mentioned topical reaction too. There's nothing to stop you talking about stuff that's in the news. As long as it's not forced, it does feel relevant to what you're doing. I mentioned campaigns already, so there's nothing to stop you getting involved in a campaign or talking about stuff that you're passionate about. And repurposing content, that's about taking something that someone else has done, putting your own twist on it, and then resharing it. There's nothing to stop you doing that, although it's always good practice and courtesy, really, to share what the source of whoever's giving you that material. The most important thing is you have to sort of feel relevant to people if they want to really read your content and engage with it. Is it useful? Is it interesting to them? Is it funny? Are you showing the human side? You can be too corporate, so avoid that. Put yourself in their shoes. If you were them, what would you want to hear from you? And that sometimes can give you some quite good ideas. Now, so far, I've only talked about written content, but of course, this applies to video too. Many people these days are making little video messages that they particularly use in places like LinkedIn or on Instagram. That's absolutely great if you've got the time and the confidence to do it. Just again, be careful that you've got something worthwhile to say. Otherwise, it can seem a bit a case of doing it for the sake of doing it rather than it having any real value. So it has to be useful. So how often should you be producing content? Well, I've listed them here. You might well know this, but Facebook once a day is fine. Posts on Facebook tend to stay around a while. That's the way Facebook works. So once a day is fine, twice a day if you want. Instagram, similarly, once, twice a day is plenty if the content's good. Twitter is the hungry beast, 4 to 6 times a day, because a tweet doesn't have a very long shelf life. And that's because you tend to follow quite a lot of other people on Twitter. So your timeline is constantly shifting, and your posts are doing that in other people's timelines. But there are some positives to that, which I'll talk about in a moment. On LinkedIn, you should probably be on LinkedIn every day, but that doesn't mean necessarily you're posting your own content every day. It's the way you interact with other people, liking, commenting, creating conversation threads, and so on. You can post more than once a week if you want, but not the longer articles. That's not necessary. Treat them like blogs. Once or twice a month is fine. You can overdo it. And similarly with your website, probably aim as a good starting point for a blog a month. If you want to build on that, absolutely fine. Blogs do have to be quite long these days. Google likes your blogs to be well over 500 words, possibly up to 1,000 or even more words. So they do take a bit of work. The old days of banging out a blog that lasted 200 words are gone, I'm afraid. Google doesn't really like those, and therefore they don't really help with your SEO. And in all of this, please don't forget this isn't a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday thing. Lots of people consume the social media most over the weekend. So you have to factor in the fact you've got to be posting 7 days a week if you're on a platform that requires daily activity, and most of them do, I'm afraid. So people say, well, how do I do this? I'm busy. And yes, there's a little bit of effort involved, particularly with social media and creating your content and thinking about it. But I've given you lots of ideas already around content. The big thing is that you must plan. So the best way to really make your social media work for you is, first of all, work out you're on the right platforms. Don't overdo it. Don't try and stretch yourself too thin if you are busy. Stick to the 1 or 2 where you think you're going to have most success and where your customers are. Then build a simple grid, a monthly grid with the dates down the left-hand side, column for each platform you're on, and sit down and in ring fence half a day maybe, and you can write all your month's content in half a day. Just sit down and get it done. You just need a different idea for each day. And of course, you can tweak the post across the different platforms to tailor it for the different styles and formats on the different platforms. Think about the images you're going to attach them. I'll talk more about images later on. But the idea is you're thinking ahead, and that way you can also mix up your content. So all those different types of content, the different ideas I gave you earlier, the thing is to mix them up across a week so that it's not too samey, and certainly no hard selling, because that's not really what we're talking about here with content. This is not hard marketing, it's very subtle. But there is a very direct causal link between how active you are and how much content you put out there and how much reaction you get back, how your followings will increase on social media, how much more sharing you will get and likes. And certainly on LinkedIn, you've probably seen this yourselves, that if you're active, you have an active period on LinkedIn where you're involved in a conversation, maybe posted one or two things, the number of people who look at your profile definitely goes up. It's the direct link between the two. So there's your payback. So I've talked about varying your content, and have a blog plan again. So sit down and maybe map out 12 months worth of blogs. What are you going to talk about in January, February, March? If something fresh comes along that's more relevant and topical, you can always shunt one of your more timeless ideas further down, or you can do extra blogs. That's up to you. But also from your blogs, you'll generate a lot of ideas for your social media content out of those blogs. So you can coordinate your content. That's what I mean by syndicate. You to time it. So you're not having to constantly reinvent the wheel. Share the load. What do I mean by that? Well, it depends on who you are and what your business is like. But have you got a team? Could more than one of you actually be creating the content so that you are spreading the load in that way? It's absolutely fine to do that, but just bear in mind that tone of voice thing. People might have different style, and you do need to have an overall feel that it's your business. So you'd have to work on that if more than one of you are doing, but it's perfectly possible to do that. So the idea of planning is it is a very good use of your quiet time and guarantees that you keep your activity levels at the right level. And certainly it helps you manage that workload. If you're trying to think spontaneously every day, what am I going to tweet or put on Facebook? It's hard work and your mind goes a blank, and it doesn't really work that way. When you do have spontaneous things to say, and they will happen, on top of your planned content, they are enriching your content even further. They're added value. So just because you're planning your content, don't stop doing the spontaneous stuff as well. That's when you really hit the mother load and you're becoming very active and people will react to you. So I talked about Twitter being a hungry beast. I wanted to try and share this with you to give you an example of actually how it's not as scary as it feels. So I mentioned the fact that tweets move very quickly on Twitter, and that means you can use the same tweets at different times on different days because people have different habits about when they consume content. This actually is one that I did for a school, which is why it talks about pupil achievement. But you could do something similar. Each color is one piece of content. So actually, there's a whole week's worth of content, Monday to Sunday, 5 times a day. So that's 35 tweets for just 6 pieces of content. And this is where the planning comes in. If you tried to do this spontaneously, it would drive you mad and exhaust you. You wouldn't have time to do anything else. But with planning, you can do this. So I'm hoping that shows that it's not as onerous as it sounds. The thing about social media is, if you're serious about them, you have to do it properly. You have to really service those platforms. Otherwise, you just don't get anything back from them. So I've talked about content ideas. I've talked about the need to plan. Then think about your style and other useful things. First of all, be a human being. Don't be too corporate. The way you write is very relaxed and conversational. Be very useful. There's nothing to stop you signposting even stuff from other businesses. If it's useful, that's adding value to your content. People won't be disloyal to you for doing that. Far from it, be the opposite. Do be an expert if you can. Share your advice, give little tips, and that thing about knowing your audience and being interesting is very important. So, and pitch it at the right level too. You don't be too technical, but equally you don't be patronising. You've got to be somewhere in the middle, haven't you? And that comes with experience and trial and error. And be pictorial. Words these days, there was a time when words were enough, particularly on social media. These days, that's not the case. You really got to think about pictures and video to go with pretty much everything you're putting out there. So you've got to think about that. I've talked about being human and conversational, so it's important to be informal. People expect it online. That is the expectation now, that you're not reading academic pieces. And occasionally I see a blog that's been written, someone who's tried to take themselves a bit too seriously, and actually it's hard work to read. So, our intention is very short online. So you have to think about that. Keep your sentences short, no dense text. Bullet points are really good for breaking up text on the page. You talk directly to the person reading your content. That's really important. So you say you, we, I, and not. Don't refer to yourself in the third person. That feels very odd. And definitely no jargon. Use everyday words. Don't be frightened of shortening verbs. I know some people are, they think it's poor form, but there's nothing wrong with we're rather than we are, or we've rather than we have. It's just the way we would communicate naturally. This is very much about trying to communicate in written form as if you were speaking. So a really good tip, and I say this as a former broadcast journalist with the BBC, just try reading it out loud. And if it doesn't flow for some reason, particularly your blogs, your longer pieces, it's not right. So rewrite it so that when you read it out loud, it flows and it's easy to read. And the short sentences definitely help with that. So I've talked about pictures. This is a little bit of research from Facebook. It won't come as a surprise to you, but it's interesting nonetheless. So Facebook did some research and they discovered that posts got 80% more engagement if there was a photo album attached. That's where there's more than one image. Maybe you would expect that because actually every click through a picture is a piece of engagement. An individual picture, interestingly, got even more engagement, and video also double the engagement. So, that really proves the point. These days, you have to think about images. So, and I'm as guilty as anyone. I'll be doing something and something will happen. I think afterwards, bother, I should have taken a picture of that. You have to try and keep it front of mind all the time. It gives you useful content for later on. Of course, you can use stock images, but the trouble is they do look like stock images. And you also have to think about the copyright issues. Don't forget emojis. Don't overdo them, but they're perfectly adequate, particularly on social media. And memes and GIFs. Well, memes are, you can see an example of a meme there. It's a photograph with an image with some funny words on, usually funny. And GIFs are the same thing in moving film, little video clips. And you'll find on Twitter, on Facebook, they give you, when you create a post, the opportunity to search for a GIF, and you can search by any word you like. So this is a way of creating, providing some sort of visuals for your content if you've got nothing of your own to add to it. The thing about memes and GIFs is don't use them all the time because they can make you feel a bit lightweight. But every now and again, it can add a bit of humour, emphasize a point, and be perfectly fine. So I talked earlier about being topical. Obviously, we do a lot of work with the news media. PR is one of the strings to our bow. When you actually analyse news, it falls into a remarkably small number of categories. There are things that just happen. That could be everything from a royal wedding to the weather to a sporting event. Crime probably comes into that category too. There's unusual stuff. So from a PR perspective, superlatives, the records, the best, first, but also quirky things, stunts, people shaving their hair for charity. Controversy, certainly one I tend to encourage and advise my clients to steer away from. But people falling out is always news, and you could probably put all politics into that. Brexit probably came into that category, and but it's a massive talking point, is it not? When things are controversial, we tend to talk about them. Human interest, of course, people are interested in people, and again, think about that in the context of your own business and your staff and what's happening in behind the scenes, if you like, almost in your own lives. Obviously, stuff that can be shared. Sometimes the picture is the story. I mentioned someone having their head shaved. That's one example. The big fire is another example on the telly where actually in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a news story, but the pictures are good, so they'll show it. And then the last one, which is the one that I really wanted to focus on, is topicality. So this is stuff that is in the news at the moment that's relevant to your world, and you should seize that stuff and talk about it. You can comment on government policy, you can comment on what's going on in your neighborhood or in your industry or sector. You can talk about the impact of the pandemic on your business. It's such a rich hunting ground for you. The great thing is that whatever you do that's associated with what's in the news at the moment, it makes what you're talking about relevant and is much more likely to get a response, incidentally. So I talked about Brexit and COVID. They are obvious real examples of this. Here are some other ones. There are things that happen in the national calendar that you can tap into. We've just had a budget, lots of opportunities to talk about that. And there are other economic stats that come out through the year, such as employment figures or GDP figures, or export trade figures, whatever. What about government reports or policies that come out that are relevant to your industry? You can comment on them. That's a really good way of establishing yourself as a thought leader in your field. Maybe you could even be a case study for the news media, for the budget, for example. That's something we've done for clients before. All of that sort of thing, of course. If you get news coverage for yourselves, great thing to talk about as part of your content. And I've talked about being a government leader and just tap into those talking points. You just think, if I bumped into one of my mates in the street today, what would we talk about? And you almost want to sort of push at that door that's already half open. But it is about timing. Sometimes with this stuff, you have to move quite quickly. So again, I talked about having your content planned. You might have written a blog that's due to go out in 2 days' time. Something happens, you think, oh, I really should write a blog about that. Or make the effort, spend an hour, get your blog written, and just put it in there out rather and save the other one that you've written. Because these opportunities for you to be topical and relevant don't come up every day, so you need to take advantage of them. So I hope you've enjoyed that little talk. I've rather romped through that. To sum up, really, content is absolutely crucial online. If you want to be noticed online, you have to be active. And the way you're active is to create content that people want to read and particularly want to share. So do be useful. Do try and take a step back from your business and think about it in the round and try and not fall into the trap of not seeing the wood for the trees because you're too close to it. I'm very happy to have a discussion about any aspects of what we do, whether it's social media or copywriting or publicity, or just wanting to pick my brains a bit more about content marketing and how you might be able to make it work for your business. So these are my contact details. I'm going to leave them on this slide so that you can take them down. My email address is there and my mobile phone number. Also, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be very happy to get a message from you, as long as you don't bombard me with sales messages immediately afterwards. Joking. Our website's there. Do have a look at all the blogs that we've written and the services that we provide. So I hope you found that useful. And I really hope that we get to see you face to face at some point, because wouldn't that be good? All the best.